Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss and internet shitlords, and today I'm doing a review of Righteous Blood Ruthless Blades, Wuxia Roleplaying, written by Brendan Davis and Jeremy Bai. This has been published by Osprey Games, which are mostly famous not for RPG products, but for making some really incredible guides to historical armies and things like that. Those of you who have been around from like the 80s will remember those in the 90s. As you can see, his book is quite beautiful, very well produced. It's in a hardcover format, smaller size, similar roughly to my smaller size products like World of the Last Sun or the old school companions. Before I proceed, I should comment Brendan Davis is the owner of Bedrock Publishing, who published my Arrows of Indra book. On account of that, I believe that there have been some cancellation attempts on him, so it needs to be mentioned. However, I had nothing to do with the production of this book or any book of his since Arrows of Indra. I make no money from it or anything like that, and I think I can be objective in my analysis of the product. I think it's This book is, well, the first thing to comment about is that it's not an OSR book, which instantly makes it slightly less desirable in my eyes. Now, the thing is, there are parts of this book which are absolutely incredible. And then there are other parts which drive me to madness. But some of those are subjective things for me that you might not have a problem with, you might actually like. So we're going to take a look at it here. So Righteous Blood Ruthless Blades is very much what it says it is, Wuxia Roleplaying. And it's that was a little note from Brendan. I'm going to put that aside here. It's a game that is set in a pseudo-historical China, but it's like actual China. It's very similar in some ways to my Silk Road Sword and Caravan book that is actually set in the historical Silk Road, except that in this case, it's not a fantasy world. It is China, but it is the China not so much of history as it is the China of the wuxia genre. And in every respect about emulating a genre, this book is incredibly good. It does such a good job of providing the tools that are necessary to make the game really feel like what you get out of watching these wuxia Hong Kong action movies. Mechanically, that's a different story. So the game is focused on the Jianghu, which is basically the world of martial artists in the context of wuxia films. And you get some things that are like just very typical aspects of that world in the actual mechanics. So that, first let me explain the basic mechanics, right? So problem number one for me is that this uses dice pools. They're not the worst dice pools I've ever seen. I think they're very similar to the ones that are in a book that I reviewed on my blog many years ago called Servants of Gaius, which is that you roll a number of D10s depending on your skill level, or your attack versus defenses of your opponent in an opposed check. And of those D10s that you roll, you only take the biggest result, right? You're not adding a whole bunch of dice or something like that. You just use the highest number. There's a dice cap. You never roll more than 7 D10 no matter what. You can have bonuses or penalties in the form of extra or reduced numbers of dice that you roll. And so that's the basic mechanic of the game. Now, talking about stuff like that you have that emulate the genre, you've got stuff like fire deviation that creates unusual effects when your ki is not balanced, right? Or killing aura, this is especially good. It's basically that, every time you kill an opponent, you add a point to your killing value, and this expresses a certain aura that is essentially the level of your character and that other people can, other martial artists can kind of sense, right? So that they're going to sense how much of an experienced killer that an opponent is, right? There are levels, so that when you go up in levels, you end up having different abilities that you gain. There are multiple ways of gaining levels depending on what the DM wants to do. So you can have, like, in a very short campaign, have just people level up in every adventure, or you could have an experience point system that can be set up for playing a 6-month-long campaign or a long-term campaign where it takes you more time to gain XP. And you gain XP from doing things like accomplishing important goals, or obtaining revenge, or killing or defeating someone stronger than you. There are rules for alcohol consumption, which are, of course, a big part of the wuxia setting, right? And that can also translate into a drunken bonus, where if a character has exceeded the drinking limit, they gain a drunken bonus from being drunk, which is only for situations that are exceptionally helpful for getting the bonus. But of course, there are drunken masters in this game. The artwork, as you can see, is very nice. It's very well done. There are rules on Chinese dialect. Your combat rules. There's a lot. Well, hang on. Here you've got, death and maiming tables, which are, like severe injuries that you can end up receiving as a result of martial battles. Overland travel rules. Character creation, you start with a signature ability. You get a single counter. Later on, you can gain more of those. You have resources. And here's another problem with the game, is that it's based on all of these kind of special conditions. So you select an occupation, and then you have to select signature abilities. And there's like a shitload of signature abilities, right? All of which are very interesting, Bittered Woe, Joint Attack, Bone Shattering Song, Cackle of the Yin Ghost. All of them have these kind of Chinese titles, right? Cleaver of the Four Suns, Crescent Moon Queen. A lot of these are based on, actual or very, very much inspired by actual moves in different martial arts styles, giant sword fighter, et cetera, et cetera. But, the mechanic is you're basically doing, it's not point buy in the sense that you have points, but it's, essentially character building in a very free style. That means that people that want to game the system, if they really go into it, will be able to game the system. So tons of those. Then there's the counters, where you have special defenses against specific types of attacks. Rules on, I'm going to move that over here, try to reduce the glare. Rules on wealth and social resources. You can play as a Confucian official. Different types of weapons in the game. Again, very nice art. Lots and lots of rare weapons of different types. The top 10 weapons, legendary items. Rare and prized objects. Lots of great stuff here, and very, very based on a combination of serious deep level research on wuxia films, wuxia literature, historical accounts and oddities of all different kinds. So, in the sense of the setting up of the game, eccentricities, right? Because of course, that in movies you've got, in the wuxia stories, you have all the wuxia people are kind of on the margins of society and have a variety of eccentricities. Fire key deviation generates specific eccentricities. And the base, most of the mechanic works out of skills, which includes things like defenses, martial arts skills, specialist skills. Your character, when you make the character, has a number of points that they put into skills divided by different categories. You can choose to have no points in a single category in exchange for having more points in a different category. But again, it's so open. One of the things about OSR play, some OSR games are more complex than others, but almost all of them are set up in such a way that you have either no options or limited options as you level. Now, I'm not a fan of no option character creation, right? I mean, like, obviously you choose a class or whatever, but a lot of OSR games, the stats and the abilities that you get are pretty much set in stone, except usually for like what spells spellcasters get. Some other games, for example, in Lion and Dragon and most of my more recent ones, and even in Arrows of Indra, I always, what I do is have random tables that allow a variety of different potential benefits every time you level, so that characters vary from each other, but without having the problem of creating a list of like 50 items that you then have to pick one or two from, which is a bit of an issue in terms of gameability. Now, the thing that is really amazing about this is when you get to this chapter that I've just been paging through now, which is starting about game mastering the Jianghu, which is that the world design has a big emphasis on exactly the sort of thing that you get in wuxia stories and movies. So you've got a big list here of NPCs, right? And you're going to see that these NPCs are detailed in Auntie Ying's wine shop, that are detailed in the later part of the book. And you have stuff like encounters that are like in tea house and brothel encounters, which is very interesting because in Sword and Caravan, for example, in the appendix, I have all sorts of encounters like that sort of thing. Like I have like encounters in caravanserais and things like that, right? And that is an incredible resource for any DM as they're running the game for a kind of open-ended sandbox style of play. And so what you have to make sure is that those sorts of encounters are really crafted to emulate the world, right? So in Sword and Caravan, you have like tribal encounters, caravanserai encounters with different types of groups that you can find in cities, nobles, scholars, etc., mystics, all of which are full of adventure seeds, and that is similarly done here. You have different sorts of adventures, types of adventures that are classified here into categories for the DM to think of doing. You have inspiration from legend, history, and tradition. All that stuff, I mean, is stuff that I I adore, And so, people have asked me if I'm ever going to do a Chinese setting, and I'm pretty sure that at some point, I mean, if I, God willing or whatever, if I have the time to, I will. And if I do, it'll probably be based in and around the time of Sword and Caravan, right? So it'll probably be either the Song Dynasty during the same time as Sword and Caravan, or slightly after, once the Mongols have conquered all of the Jing dynasty. So you got the Mongols in the north and the very beleaguered Song dynasty that is doomed to be destroyed in the south. Which is like, to me, the most interesting period. The game setting here, the DM is provided with a number of options that it can just be kind of a generic China by rough period. Or you can make it more specific, right? So it has like the classical period, which is like China before the Mongols, basically. Then you have the Ming, and you have the later dynasties like the Manchus. Got all of these great sort of tables like secret history, fated relationships, calamities, sect founders, lots of stuff on the complexity of Chinese history and culture. Like, this is quite amazing. And it's the sort of thing, a lot of this is stuff that I would write. Obviously, my game probably would not be quite as focused on emulating wuxia, but I mean, a lot of what is in wuxia is just kind of an exaggeration of stuff that was really happening in different periods of Chinese history. Like there's a huge connection to historical elements in most wuxia stories and films, right? So here you have like the categories, right? So the ancient period, which is everything from like the Han dynasty to the Song dynasty, which is kind of the later ancient period. I would say the Tang and the Song should have had their own category because they're not really, they're by the time of, certainly the Song dynasty is the hallmark for all later Chinese culture and is therefore You could say that about the Han, but the Han still had a lot of important differences that still made them more foreign to modern Chinese culture than the Song were, right? Whereas the Song were like the great dynasty that then everything after the Mongols tries to emulate. Interestingly enough, he kind of skips the period of Mongol rule, because you go from there to the Ming, and then to the Qing or Manchu dynasty, and then you can even run it in theory in modern China, say like in the early 1900s, which you get in like some of these later sort of wuxia stories, and you have locations, right? Because there are different regions of China that would have very different styles depending on where you're playing in, right? And then he goes into more detail later on, where he specifies a couple of these regions with more material, right? And the material, a lot of it is stuff that becomes instantly usable, right? Like, who are the top 10 fighters? What are the top 10 weapons, And those are actually in the book, right? So you get to look at all that. And then there's like places, right? And groups, right? Like the ancient Willow Sect, Auntie Yin's wine shop, which you saw the outline for earlier, cults and groups, special secret societies, these sort of things are hugely important in wuxia, and a lot of them really existed. I mean, not specifically these ones, but things very similar to this did exist in historical China, right? In Sword and Caravan, I talk about Zhuji and the White Deer Grotto School, for example, and so it's there's like really remarkable stuff in terms of what you could call the setting lore. It's really, really excellent. And you'll notice when you get to like characters, there's Auntie Ying again. You have the kind of background of the story, what they're connected to, and then recent developments, like stuff that is important to the NPC at the moment, right? Which is very cleverly set up, and so these are people that will become like, it's a very character-based campaign, right? Where your characters are presumably interacting with these heroes and villains and whatnot, making allies and enemies and all of that sort of thing, which is exactly what happens in the movies, right? So in that sense, this is like so well done. Now, I'm not a fan of the system, as it were, especially like, the very heavy amount of kind of careful study that you would have to do. At the very least, the DM would have to do to guide the players in terms of what type of character they wanted to design, and because it's all kind of, I mean, like some of the abilities require previous abilities and whatnot, but that only compounds the problem, because that's how you get this kind of character building attitude. But I know that there are some people that love that stuff, people that looked at 3.5 D&D and said it doesn't have enough character build stuff in it, and they're going to love that, but I don't, So if this had been an OSR game, it would have just been unbelievably great if it could have been done in a style, obviously in my preference, if it had been done in a style more similar to what I do with Lion and Dragon and my other OSR products, but I think that the only OSR game that Brendan was ever involved in was Arrows of Indra, and he just published that. He didn't write it, so it's just not his thing, and that's okay. We understand that. If you're not an OSR guy and you've come across this thing, or if you're a guy that likes OSR games but also really likes these types of games with these types of mechanics, you're probably going to just love this book, right? Because definitely all the part of the history and lore is fantastic, right? So then after you get the big NPCs, you get also some, stats for what are basically mooks, right? Which is exactly what it should be. Like if you're fighting a group of bandits, unless you're very, very novice characters, those should be kind of throwaway enemies, dangerous animals. There's only 3 there: crocodile, shark, and tiger, but okay. And then you get an adventure, that gives you a context of, one example of how to run the game with, a much smaller regional map trying to get to the city of Kaifeng. very important city in the Song dynasty. It's a, again, in terms of setting and of genre design, it's really masterful. I think it's just unbelievably great. Here's the character sheet for you to look at, so you can see that there aren't stats as such. You'll notice, right? Like, you don't have attributes, right? What you have are certain characteristics that have to be kept track of, like your killing aura, drinking limits, killing aura, darkness, max wounds, current wounds, XP, your defenses, and then you have your skills, right? And so, like I said, you'll get points that you can put in, I guess, World of Darkness style, into a variety of skills, which you can choose at the beginning. You can put points in every category, or you can choose to have one category completely empty in order to get extra points to put in another category. And then you have to list your abilities, eccentricities, counters, fire deviation. This has just gone blurry. There we go. Weapons, injury, equipment, blocked acupoints, grudges, notes. This is a game that I would really like to love, right? But I don't think it's the type of game, the mechanics of it make it not the type of game that I would play. But in terms of huge admiration for the really excellent example of design of emulation of genre. I'm very, very impressed by that. So here's the thing, if you're cool with dice pool mechanics and these sorts of, ability trees that you can, create a character that is going to be very finely crafted, and that probably you will have a much better time of making an effective character by putting a lot of effort into studying these different abilities and figuring out which ones give you exactly what you want, then you're going to really like this game. If that's not your sort of deal, you probably won't like the game, but the setting material is amazing. And that's mostly what I can say about that. So I'm going to have a link in the description to where you can pick up Righteous Blood Ruthless Blades. And if it's not your type of thing, then be sure to check out OSR products like Sword and Caravan, which is my setting on the Silk Road and the era of the Third Crusade, Third, Fourth, and Fifth Crusade, actually. And that covers all of the Silk Road region. Or if you want to get Brendan some money, but you don't really want to buy a non-OSR book, check out Arrows of Indra, which is role-playing in the world of the epic Indian myths, the Mahabharata era especially. Or check out any of my other products like World of the Last Sun, Lion and Dragon, The Invisible College, and my RPG Pundit Presents series. If you don't have a lot of money but you want to support me, then pick up one of my 108, I think it is now, PDFs of the RPG Pundit Presents series. They range in price from 99 cents to $4.99, and you're supporting me, but you're also getting stuff that you can really use in most of your campaigns. There's gonzo stuff like Last Sun, and there's all, weird fantasy sort of thing. And then there's also the medieval authentic stuff, which you can also find in the compilations of Old School Companion 1 and 2. Old School Companion 3 will eventually come out, but first, I'm told that soon work will begin on compiling the second Gonzo volume, which I think will probably be called either Gonzo or Weird Fantasy Gaming Compendium. So that's somewhere on the way. And also more stuff is being made for Sword and Caravan. You can already pick up Social Encounters on PDF, and I have been told now that it is definitely going to come out in print on demand because people kept asking for it. Originally, the idea, Social Encounters is only about 20 pages long. And so we said, well, we're going to just make it a PDF, right? But a whole bunch of people have been asking me, hey, can we get Social Encounters in print, right? Social Encounters is a supplement, a rules supplement technically for Sword and Caravan or Lion and Dragon, but you can use it in any OSR game that vastly expands how to handle social interactions of different kinds using the reaction roll rules from OSR gaming. And it's a really useful tool for any DM to adjudicate stuff like gambling, intimidation, recruitment, debates, presenting yourself at court, resolving legal cases, all sorts of stuff that gives you a mechanical guide to how NPCs should react to the different ways PCs try to approach them in terms of their role playing. So yeah, be sure to check that out. I am still working on the next source book, which is going to be, it's probably going to be called something like Heroes and Villains of the Silk Road. And it's going to be a compendium of biographies and statistics for almost all of the NPCs that show up in Sword and Caravan, that are mentioned in Sword and Caravan, including guys like Saladin and Richard the Lionhearted, but including a bunch of other more unusual characters that populated that world at the time. It'll also have some more rules in it. There'll finally be stats for if you really want to play an assassin, like a real proper Nazari Ismaili Hashashin in your campaign. And they'll have rules on Song Dynasty grenades. Yes, they had grenades back then. So and a few other things like that. So I'll let you know when that comes out. It's still going to be a while because I'm still working on the final editing phase of it, and then it's going to have to get into the publishing phase. So it's going to be a bit, but it'll be coming out eventually. And yeah, check out all my stuff. And if you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and share this video anywhere you think people will find Righteous Blood Ruthless Blades interesting, or they'll find, my videos in general interesting, because that is always a very big help. Even if you aren't in a situation to buy any of my products, that's another great way that you can support this channel. That's everything for today. Currently smoking Peterson Oversize plus our Gento Natural.